Silkscreen printing, it's so important to me. It's almost indescribable. It's like something I have to do. I wake up every day and I think about it. I'm Tom, founder of Make Ready, Avant Arte's exclusive print partner. We're based here in London, making silkscreen and digital prints for international artists. I was working for a printmaker where, I guess I didn't really learn very much. I thought, is this it? And I said, I can have a go at this. Really, it began in my garage in 2017. It grew just from one job to the next. Just kept doing something good and doing something good. And now we're in the largest silkscreen printing facility purpose-built for fine art in the world. We have a studio full of master printers who are dedicated to making amazing work. We create prints that are not just reproductions, they exist unto themselves. They are really unique. And I implore anyone who has one of our prints, look at that thing really closely and you will wonder, how the hell did they make that? We first met Avant Arte in 2020 during COVID, and it felt like we were talking to ourselves. We were at home almost straight away. I guess we just had a great connection and this commitment to making high quality, accessible works for everyone. We literally have the same objective. Let's make an amazing print. There's a number of artists that I never thought I'd work with, particularly George Condo. We made these very complex prints. You just couldn't understand how we made them, which was exactly what we want. Our prints are novel. You look at them and they're textured, and is that a painting? And Harlan Miller once touched one of the Condo prints when I showed him. He says, "This photogravure and is that screen printing?" I said, "No, they're both silkscreen printing. They're on the same page, but they say so many different things." And Condo is just a celebration of ink and paint made with this passion towards finish and satin and gloss and matte. And you can almost pick off the bits of paint. And then you catch it in the light and you can literally see the talk of the canvas. So you get this dynamic range of texture. With Ai Weiwei thinking about texture, he came to us and said, nothing interesting has happened in screen printing since Andy Warhol. And I thought, well, okay, right. I called the supplier and said, how much gold powder should I put in this ink? And they said 10% by weight. And I thought, I'll put 50 in. And it just became this paste. And then I printed this red over the top of it and he loved it. He said, now I know where to come to make great prints. And I'll never forget that. When you're buying a print, you're buying hundreds of years of history. You're buying Gutenberg until now. But it's also been worked on by people who are artists in themselves, the craftsmen, the printmakers. They've looked at it and reacted to it and go, well, I think we should do this. I think we should put this yellow here. And then you're also buying that. You're buying their interpretation of that image. We're making people's heirlooms. I want people to give these prints to their children. That's the mindset that we're thinking about. It's an incredible journey that we've been on. But the philosophy and the principles behind the prints that we make hasn't changed. The way that we work, the way that every press is managed, the giddy, childish joy that we get from just talking about the tiniest little detail is in every print. I want to give that to the next person. They can take on the principles of Make Ready. That's my drive, is just to have a mark on this process and on the world of art.
Here we are. Welcome to the damn show, everybody, the Digital Art Market Show. I am Roger Dickerman, RD, here with Abigail and Tom from Avant Arte. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's really great to be here.
It's a pleasure. I really enjoy I enjoy conversations of all kinds. And I think the audience here is used to direct one-on-one interviews. And Abigail, when we had talked a little bit ago about maybe doing something a little bit different and getting behind the scenes, more process-oriented, maybe even getting some visuals of the floor at Make Ready, that was exciting to me. And so I'm glad we're able to do it on a special day, of course, on a Wednesday. So thanks to you both again.
Yeah, thank you. I think this will be really special because Tom is the master printmaker at Make Ready, which is part of Avant Arte. But I think it'll give very much a different perspective of what we're trying to do with a lot of the digital artists and what Avant Arte is about as well with edition making.
I'd love for you, and please, you can go back and forth. Either of you can field these questions that I'll pose, but I'd love for you just to give a bit of background first, right? This is like having you guys on the damn show again, a first for many. And so we have, well, actually, that's not technically true. We did Claire Silver. That was a bit of our origin story here on the show. But go back a bit further than that and frame people up, because when you came into roughly speaking, the Web3 space, right? And working with some of the digital artists that the tokenized digital art space may know, you had a rich history prior to that. So maybe let's start there and frame that for us, and let's walk it forward.
For sure. Maybe we start with the origin story for you, Tom, on Make Ready, and then I can take over on Avant Art and then Web3 and digital art from there.
Sure thing, yeah. So Make Ready started in my garage about 9 years ago, which is pretty crazy to think about. We were swept off our feet now with work. I mean, I was just on the floor printing something there and then, right here. So, but yeah, it started then in my garage. I remember sweeping the floor, thinking, I could have a go at this. And I was working at another printer's, making prints for famous artists, but they weren't my contemporaries. They weren't people that I was super interested in. And I guess one thing led to another. Like, I really did start it with an idea and a credit card. That was basically it.
The Wild West days.
Yeah, and a letter from my dad saying, "What the hell are you doing?" Leaving your job basically. But yeah, I guess I was really good at it, And I remember my first client was Pentagram, one of the first clients I had, and I remember they kept saying, "Oh, can we come see the studio?" And I said, "No, it's being refurbished." It's just me in the garage, and it was for Marina Willer. And it was all these amazing rubbings of manhole covers, and I actually think they're in their offices, which is still pretty cool to this day. So, and then one thing led to another, and I was working for, I moved to Kentish Town, I moved to Northwest London, took a gamble, on a studio space. It's obviously hard to scale, so it was quite a gamble to suddenly, take on some rent, and I acquired a few more bits of equipment secondhand, and the story just grew from there, really. I think my first big client was someone called Anthea Hamilton, who's a British artist. She was Turner Prize nominee, and I started working for her, and then this guy Oliver Osborne, and a few really, really cool people. But it was Jeremy Deller actually when we worked for him, and then he kind of connected us with a few people. And I guess one thing led to another, and we were working for Unit London. That was a big
technically
exactly.
Back then.
Yeah, exactly. Technically, I think we met. Yeah, and we were printing for a lot of Unit's artists. And Howes and Worth, we were doing a lot of prints for Howes and Worth for the estates of Chalida and Alexander Calder. So it was pretty wild, and I think people thought we were a lot bigger than we really were. And it really was just me and an idea, basically. And like I said, I think I was really good at it, I guess. And lo and behold, we came across Avant Arte, and when we met the Avant Arte team, it was match made in heaven, really, because we were, my brother works at Google, right? I grew up with computers, that's my life. I think I'm quite tech savvy. I mean, maybe not as someone like Matt does, Lauren, but so I was trying to blend, screen printing, which is a super analog process, and digital printing with some more digital, pre-press ideas that I had. And when we met Avant Arte, it was, like I said, it was a match made in heaven. And then to move into the Web3 space with them was incredible, and to work with people like Matt has just been an amazing journey. So I'm still discovering so much about the Web3 space.
Yeah, it's a constant curveball of process and as well as ideation. But yeah, it was 5 years ago that you formally, was it 5 years you joined four, that Avant Arte brought Make Ready in part of the group. And I would say we have the world's largest production network of producers all around the world, but I would say 95% of what we do is made here. Yeah. And that is extremely rare for an editions company. I actually don't know if there's really anyone else that has the in-house power and able to also ideate and do a lot of R&D, which is so core to what I do with Web3 artists, and finding something that's new and novel, are able to do that at scale.
It's the scale.
Yeah, it's a scale.
There's certainly others, but it's the scale that we do it at.
Yeah. And about 2 years ago, Avant Arte was looking at the digital space of artists, being it's really, really interesting that's going on here, of a new market, a new collector base, as well as new practices. And our mission statement at Avant is to make art radically more accessible. And so the long-term gain is we see, editions taking on a myriad of forms. And so how, digital artwork will evolve and being even more important as a native medium. But right now we thought we see like such a need to provide scale, but also like professional edition making for these artists and the ability to express their artwork in a certain quality into like the physical realm. And so that's like what we have started this mission and like evolving into and taking the steps towards that. And also just in general, embracing digital art in the future too.
Questions, so many questions. I want to go back first. You had an idea and a credit card and a letter from your dad. I think that's such a great line. And I think many out there, entrepreneurs, can very much relate to that line. I'm raising my hand. I can relate to that line very well. So real quick follow-up to that. When did your dad come around? When did the letter turn into him, ideally, hopefully somewhere becoming a believer?
I think it was, I can't remember it. I have to think back. I think he did help me a lot actually with building things. Like there was no kind of money flowing, and I really mean that. It was really tough, but he was a carpenter. He was really good at it, and he maybe a couple of years in, I think he was like, "Are you okay?" A lot of questions. Are you okay? Are you sure? Like, can you definitely not get your job back? But I think he always knew that I was going to do something myself. So it took some time, but then when he was on board, I think he built all the shelves, and him and I plumbed in the first washout booth I had. I remember he was quite nifty, and like we couldn't get some bit of pipe to bend into the toilet, and we had to like cut it off and weld it, and it was just, it was all very Heath Robinson. But he really came around. So it was a couple of years though, I would say. But it was once he was there, he was like, okay, cool, right, I've got to help you out.
Amazing. And certainly by the Avant Arte era, right, he was fully around, and you were all plowing forward. So Abigail, the first time that we interacted was via release, probably towards the beginning of your journey in the space. And what I find fascinating about the time since is you mentioned your goal, your mission statement to provide radical accessibility, and also just to elevate, the printmaking qualities of a lot of the artists around here. It's something I feel like you've moved at your own pace, and I pay that to you as a compliment today, where I think maybe in years past in Web3, which is used to running around, constantly, maybe 3x fast on 3x podcast speed, right? That's sort of how this space operates. But now I think a lot of people are looking at these very emphatic step-by-step journeys with respect. And I think Avant Arte is one of those journeys where you've put your foot down time and time again at a high quality level at your own pace.
Yeah, I think no matter every single project that has come out the door, especially like speaking for me in Web3, like has been such a prideful moment. Like there's not a single project that I would say like I would want to do it differently in that capacity. Like the artwork selection and everything has like different market qualities. We at Avant, there's so many projects that are moving, and it is a beautiful place of like, we don't, for Web3, have to be like the rest of the space and just throwing spaghetti at a wall. It's about like intentionality and doing it right, as well as the difference on a business side is when you create a physical, there is like costs associated. Like it takes time and effort and people's like capacity to do these things. And so when you take that into account, you were like, it has to be right. It has to be perfect. And a lot of the artists are entrusting, their practice with us. And it's very much a collaboration. It's not just a handover of an artwork and being like, oh, press print. And we can maybe talk about a few examples here in a second, but the life cycle also to get a project off the ground is very different from just handing over digital works and being like, let's do an online exhibition next month. I think a healthy life cycle of a project, and this is after we receive imagery, is about 9 months. And that is like kind of like on the quicker side, like 6 to 9 months is like very healthy. And of course, different things can happen at different speeds. But there's a lot of work that even gets to that point of getting imagery. So when you're working with artists that are creating new work, it doubles that. So we have even conversations, we've been talking to artists for 2 years, trying to get like an amazing idea to fruition. And I think quality does take time.
quality takes time, no doubt about it. And you mentioned stories. I think a couple anecdotes would be amazing. Maybe a little bit of a thought prompt would be, one on the. I mean, we need an epic fail. I mean, you have such a, don't have to mention names if you don't, but just something, because there's such a qualitative element to the printmaking side, maybe something that didn't go so hot and created some internal learnings. And then of course the other side, just like a dramatic aha moment on the floor and something that you're beyond proud of.
Maybe I can get started because it kind of leads into the few examples that we talked about.
Sure.
And it's not a fail. Like, I think one of the questions I've always wanted to crack with Avant Arte is like, how do you make generative printmaking? And there's like a whole history to prints within computer art and generative art making. Like there's such a rich history there. And however, on a business scale, before you even talk to an artist, it is expensive to make prints that are like a full, like an edition of 30 different images, because essentially at that level, you're not creating like an edition, like you're creating unique bodies of work. Mm-hmm. So there's different ways that like it's taken us, there's so many different ways we've approached this question as well. And each time we work with an artist and sit down with them on like that side, like we're taking different things from their practice and bringing it into generative, and like what does that mean when in the physical realm? Mm-hmm. So for example, like we have created like a Anastasia, like looking at her through the window. She's another like master printmaker on like the Claire Silver. She does textured prints and digital prints, and she's essentially spearheaded these textured prints that have just been like iterated and iterated and iterated, and like she's learned so much about the process, and that has really been through working with these generative artists or like digital artists. And so it's kind of like, I think on that printmaking side of like learning what works within these practices and what doesn't. And then also interpreting that question, I think one of the best ways we've interpreted it is like the Matt Deslauriers print, which I think is like actually one of the most purest generative projects we've done. However, it's the same image print, but like the way you guys worked on that together was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think I can answer sort of both questions at the same time. I think, everyone sees these prints that we make and they're like, aha, here you go, here's this final thing. Much like a song, right? Yeah. David Bowie didn't write Life on Mars like that. Well, maybe he did, but I'm sure there was a long process of learning. And I feel like like you're saying about this kind of iteration of the process, kind of everything we do is a failure. Yeah. Until it's not, and I think that's the way Anastasia, or the way I challenge her a lot with that machine. We have this UV flatbed digital printer, and it's a device to deliver ink to a substrate. That's kind of it, really. And when you think about it in those simplistic terms, you can remove yourself from the romance of printmaking and actually create something totally original. And she's creating these height maps, layer by layer by layer by layer, and just kind of usurping the use of the machine. Yeah. Kind of how, a Web3 artist might do the same thing, and actually find working with Web3 artists is actually very refreshing than working with traditional artists. I find, because like working with Matt as an example, the Web3 artists are often so curious about the process and how they can make their work optimized for that process. And that brings so much joy to me as a printmaker, because it's an amazing chance to have. Matt will literally redesign his artwork to optimize itself for the way we're printing or the type of thing we're doing, and that is, we really get off on that. It's just an amazing opportunity. So I think there are many aha moments. I mean, there's certainly been them, like with Alpha Centauri Kid, like we kind of really nailed that the first time, but that is because we failed so much when we tried to do other types of work. And with Matt, I think we didn't, we're still trying to work on something with him now that we haven't really cracked. So like I said, I think everything is a failure until we kind of decide it isn't.
I think also on the question of failure, actually it's the most tests is always this equation of like RGB to CYMK. Yeah, that's a challenge. And maybe like the actual failure, it's not a failure with crypto punks, especially the individual punks. I think we might have printed like 90 Like there was like an absurd number, and I just remember sitting there with like nausea, holding my phone, having an iPad, and then having a computer all in front of me at different calibers of brightness, because that color, especially in the aliens, the cyan blue skin type, it does not exist in the physical. And it was so different. There was so many failures. I was just like, at certain points, I was like, this is not good. Like, this color's not good. And also the purple of the hats was like horrendous to print because we could not get it. Like, it was too dark.
Purples, blues, greens are very challenging. But I think that's why they're great.
Yeah.
Is because they exist in a printed reality, and they are really one-offs, you know. And like you said, we had, you know, I remember we were struggling, and I came and I just turned the brightness down on the screen and said, this is how people will see it, because, you know, color that's mixed on a monitor is additive color. All colors make white, right? It's like in the theater, you know, put all the lights together and make white. All the colors together in printmaking. Every time you intermix a color and overprint it, it gets darker, and you must sacrifice saturation. So I really enjoyed that process. You know, it was challenging, but I think we created something with CryptoPunks that was didn't exist before, and which was very much to do with the heart of the project, I thought. And
it was very much a labor of love as well, like from both teams, the CryptoPunks on the Yuga side and this on the team here. Like it was it was a really fun project because of that experimentation.
Yeah, it was very, very cool.
I love the passion that just came out of both of you, right? Where that all sort of arced to, because I think, hey, painting, right? There are layers to painting. I think we can all wrap our minds around that. And a lot of digital tools, right? A lot of artists work in layers, and we can wrap our minds around that. Sometimes from afar, printing is a cold process. It's a machine-oriented process that's a little less understood, meaning, you know, someone gets a print out the other side. At times they're thinking about the precursor to that. What you just sort of pulled the curtain back on is just an incredible, there's an art, right? You reflecting on what Anastasia is doing, you reflecting on the CryptoPunks project. There's just as much of an art there to take a different tool and bring it to life. Oftentimes, like you said, something that doesn't exist elsewhere. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, they're really unique. They're like Polaroids in time of what we're thinking about, what the artist is thinking about. You know, you couldn't really just make it again. You know, it's like a bespoke suit or something. It's the tailors at that moment, you know, what they're into and the cuts they're having. You know, it is absolutely that way. Same with the silkscreen printings we do. That obviously, you know, we did that for Matt, and I remember we weaved this fluoro ink in there, and I remember him saying, like, you know, if you had told me you can put fluorescent ink, he was, you know, he said he would be really opposed to it. But it was bringing these flavors in that he would never realize, because it is an art. You're completely right. Printmaking is, you know, basically you're controlling the flow of fluid through some sort of device onto a substrate. That's basically it. I mean, there's obviously more than that. I'm not trivializing the entire printing industry. But when you think about it like that, I think you free yourself of the romance of it, and then you suddenly make really great work. And it is an art, because you're spinning all these kind of plates all the time, and you print on two different papers. The color's going to be different. It's just this. It's like a 500,000 combination lock. You know, it's like a huge binary number. It's kind of like a million bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's just so many combinations it could be in.
Couple of things. One, I want to say hi to everyone joining us. I don't know if you two can see comments, but we have an amazing artist, Gonaji, in here saying GM, and Praveen. Hello, Praveen. And Haas says GM, everyone. Crypto is boring. Art never is. We'd love to see it. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're joining us on this unusual day for the damn show, but that's what makes it special. So let's talk about the time that you allocate, because you're creating constantly with high-level artists, right? Who are in there with you, bringing prints to life, bringing art to life. How much time do you allocate to repetition and perfection, meaning the craft that you were just honing over time versus radical? You mentioned radical accessibility, radical experimentation, trying something that's been on the mind, maybe for no explicit purpose, but something that might come into play down the road.
Yeah, before you answer it, some preface, even just about Tom and just watching you on the print studio, like I have to give him like immense accolades. Like you were very much a perfectionist and a scientist in like this precision, but also like a mad scientist of like all the ideas you were spewing at the same time. And on the business side, like it is an operation. Like we can only work with a finite amount of artists per year because of capacity issues. And so, and it's been also experimenting of like, how do you make things more efficient? And so I'll let you kind of take over now.
Yeah, I think you've put it in a nutshell. Like one of the reasons that we merged is because you know, Avant Arte could have, you know, acquired any printer. They were working, well, they at the time, to we now. We're kind of at the pick of the litter, really. Some of my favorite studios. I mean, wow, you know, we were suddenly in the midst of Brand X and Coriander and these guys, you know. But I think we had this attitude for scale. You know, we were very tech minded, very savvy. Even the way we emailed, I think, was quite refreshing to Avant Arte. You know, we replied all instead of just replied. You know, we had critical paths the way that we worked, and I think for me, there's a really fantastic book called 500 Years of Printing, and I implore everyone to read it. It's very, very good, and it basically looks at the influence the printing press has had upon society. You know, creativity and business, in my mind, are the same thing. For example, the print behind me, this isn't a Web3 artist, this is George Condo, but it's a very similar process to how we printed for Matt Laureate, actually. It was a kind of a similar way of working. There were some, you know, commercial constraints. You know, I had this system where, you know, I was printing 80, 90 colors on a sheet, and they looked amazing. But then, you know, we needed to scale that, and we thought, well, how are we going to do this? And it's just wrapped up in my mind, and I want to train people. I'm very passionate about bringing the next generation of people on board as well. I'm not just hoarding this knowledge. And basically came up with a system that could do it in much less colors. I mean, still a lot of colors, but would create millions and millions of colors. And in a way, the kind of commercial constraint created something I would have never thought of. And I actually had a massive eureka moment and created something that is even better than the product I was making before, because it is an operation, like you say, and we really, it's not you imagine you know, a company gets acquired and there's this kind of push and this pull from the creative and the corporates, right? I personally, I don't see it that way at all. Like, I think some of the most creative people I've met are in accounts, you know, and I think they have amazing ideas about the way to, you know, organize the business. And so, you know, they're kind of one and the same thing, really.
Exactly.
So how are we looking for our tour today? I want to preface that. So there's activity on the floor, right? You mentioned earlier, there are things going on out there.
So I mean, it is a fully always moving operation. It's very loud. So we wanted to start with like any questions and everything. And when we get to that, I'll kind of like also take my laptop around. There's really,
I'll try and project my voice.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure how much we'll be able to hear, but I think what the sense of what we'll do when bringing my laptop out there is just to show, even if we mute ourselves, like depending on how loud it is, just to show like the scale.
Yeah.
And I think when I talk to even artists and a lot of collectors, they're like, oh, it's a printing facility like Avant Arte. And we've had collectors who are, or people just coming through London, I'll be like, come out to Tottenham, that's a little bit outside the center. And they get here and they're like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And it is a massive operation in so many different ways, but just the amount of chemicals even in this building. But
yeah, absolutely. We can show around, and but yeah, it might be good to do questions like first.
Yeah. I wanted to tease, you know, let everyone who's filing in that we're gonna do that tour. It's just we're gonna wait a little bit. I kind of can't wait for the sound and the auditory aspect of it as well.
Yeah,
I think it'll be.
I think it would be best to show. We'll show you kind of like the frames of silk screens, like what actually, like we'll show some of the ones that are right there that we can. Yeah. We also just have to be careful with maybe a few projects.
Yeah, I will say flash.
And so the flash move of the screen.
We'll have all sorts of redacted symbols across the screen as you go.
And then we'll try and go to the back of show you where like silk screening is made, because I would say at Make Ready, all like silk screening is kind of a lot of the heart of where you started, and you've really the experimentation and perfection there too.
Yeah, and when we mix the processes, we often will screen print like for Grant Rivignon. We made these very beautiful panels for him, and they were digitally printed, and getting those colors just right was so nice. It's so difficult, and then we flooded this matte varnish over the top of them by hand. And they were full bleed, and I had to build this like crazy jig. And Anastasia and I remember we stayed one night so the dust would settle, and we used an anti-static spray gun. And so we certainly marry the processes, it's particularly for Web3 artists actually. Silk screen printing is really the heart of what we do. For sure.
How do you think about it from the business side of what we call around here, quote unquote, traditional art and Web3 artists? I do feel like those lines are progressively blurring, maybe a bit more than before. But how do you think about that from Avant Arte's perspective and from the business side?
There's actually we say Web3 or like digital artists just like for ease of like maybe talking about practices, but like we don't have a section of the website that's fully separate, and that was quite intentional from early on. And on a business perspective, when we work with an artist, that process of like working with all the different team members is exactly what all artists go through. Like it's not like, oh, we have a full different process. We do have like idiosyncrasies meant for digital artists because you have to get imagery at a certain stage in the project, and that is very different from someone who has a more primary digital practice of like creating that and like kind of working mostly with me up to that point of kind of on the concept of the project. That is very different from like maybe someone who has a painting practice, is taking high-res imagery from a painting that exists. So those are like the little differences, but as like a project coming into the business, it's not different between those fields, and we don't view it. I think it's just about working with the idiosyncrasies of creating a great print in edition.
I mean, it's art. And we think they're the same. I think that's what's so good about it is if Matt comes in here or we work with Alpha Centauri or something, we don't treat them any differently. We respect them in the same way. They're super passionate people who want to make great work, and whether it's Anish Kapoor or Matt Desloria, that's cool.
I'm so glad the two of you honed in on that aspect, because Abigail, it brings me back in 2023 when we were speaking for the first time. You had shared a bit. I was looking to understand what you were up to and what was going on, because I think you were starting to become more prominent in and across the Web3 space. And that was one of the first things we discussed, is that you guys weren't going to just do anything fast just to do it, that you were operating from that principle set of this is all art. I don't know if you framed it exactly that way at the time, but that's very much what I took away from our conversation. And again, to see that you stayed consistent with that throughout, and you are looking at it through, I think the lens that a lot of us are looking at this through, and ideally that the future will smile on that worldview too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the projects will hopefully like historically also become like anchor points. And I think we also, on the flip side, like we're embracing like a lot of like Web3 digital qualities, especially like the community angle, and like bringing them into a lot of the wider Avant Arte fold. And that's been like a process of like embracing, and that side moves so quickly. And so it's also keeping a company, that has so many different moving parts of also like embracing those elements. That's been like a really fun conversation as well.
Yeah. Has any of it driven you nuts along the way? A little bit here and there.
Yeah, so I think sometimes, just not just Web3, and I'm talking very generally here. Like, there's times when I'm printmaking and I'm sort of questioning why I chose to do this with my life. But I also play golf, and I also have the same feeling about that. I think when you're really trying to crack a creative conundrum. Like we're working for a Korean Japanese artist right now in the traditional space, or maybe there's no traditional Web3. It's just art, like I said. And it's like playing music. You just can't get it, and you're just trying. And it's just like that. It's almost like that feeling when you can't get a key in the lock, and it's infuriating. But there's a passion there. it drives me mad sometimes, those things, when I really want it to be good, or you just know, and it's very hard to be empirical and objective about what is a good image and what's successful. And I guess that's where our USP is our judgment, that we can know if something is going to be really great. And when I'm not feeling that personally about an artwork, it's tough. But then when you crack it, it's just the best feeling ever, and you remember why you're doing it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think like on the side within more of like this Web3 space is really like wanting to embrace more. Meaning like when working with an artist, we have so many myriad of things that we can do. It's not just like only about like, here's an edition and that's like the only thing Avant Arte does. Like, for example, we've done the Grant's solo show, same with ACK. We're going to be doing like, the next few months, like our first digitally forward release. Still will have a physical element, but really embracing, about this. We want Avant Arte to be across the board of like where good art is and how that, it's not like we're forcing artists to be like, you have to do like this exact physical. It's more like we as a company like want to embrace and like, steward your work and like newest body of work in its best possibility, and we want to collaborate on that. So it's more of like wanting the community to like understand that as well, like in the digital art space too.
It feels like the Claire Silver release was a solid step in that direction, right? The Daydreamer print, which was stunning, but then also on the other side of it, the unique collection of digital works.
Exactly. And we're learning so much from like, those as well as like taking steps in that direction too.
That's amazing.
I remember that video. I can remember the show. And as a viewer might imagine, the screen's flipped. I have a couple of screens up, and one of those is the screen that I'm sharing. I remember it was hard for me as that print was running over and over, and all the angles and the light reflecting off it. It was so hard for me to keep on the actual conversation. It was just it was a video that very much pulls you into its gravitational force. Speaking aspirationally, as we talked about some artists, aspirationally for an artist out there that says, I think what they're doing is very interesting. Obviously, there's, as you've mentioned, a significant pipeline and a timeline that has to go in. You mentioned 9 months is sort of even feeling like a bit quick. What aspirationally for an artist out there, what would you say to them? Hey, they want to work with Avant Arte at some point in the future. What are key considerations for them to work towards?
Yeah, I think, we are very conscious that we have a capacity as a company. And so we're taking like active steps to address that, because we do think printmaking and artwork should be accessible to all. So we have a new tool called like Art in Bio that is allowing artists of all different sizes, market-wise, or like straight out of, or even in their like MFA or undergrad being an artist, that they can do prints through us as kind of like a white label and really own their audiences again. So we've been building that out. So I have like a link in my bio. Anyone can sign up for that, and we onboard people. So that's like to make it more accessible. And then for kind of like our collaborations, a lot of the artists that we work with nowadays, like they're having careers that have spanned decades and decades. And so it's just like honing your craft and also taking the steps of like learning about printmaking, because I think as well, printmaking is not just as simple as printing something out. And if you're wanting to make prints, there is a whole art form out there, and like starting that market as well. There's like a lot of things that we've learned from the digital art side of like when someone has a full digital market, creating a physical object, sometimes there's different correlations even with those markets. And so it's really just like appreciating, I think, the collaboration with a physical object, I think specifically.
I think being excited about physical work and printmaking, I think all the best collaborations we've done, if someone is really aspiring, is to, find out as much as you can about these processes, because, there may be a way that your work shines through in an optimized way. If you're thinking, Matt, like he always uses him as an example, but he thinks in layers, and like you said, a lot of people think in that way. So But I guess for me, like any aspirational artist in general, is just like be really true and authentic, you know, and don't make work for anyone else other than be curious, you know, about yourself. You know, I mean, all the prints that I make, honestly, like I make them because, you know, I find the finish interesting.
Yeah.
You know, the prints are quite glossy. Like a lot of our prints are very, I mean, obviously Claire Silver is very glossy, but that's because I drive Anastasia to find that right gloss, because that's something that we're interested in. And I think that's why our work is authentic. So I don't think you can trade authenticity, you know.
What are your personal philosophies around art? Like, do you have prints on your walls?
Oh, yeah.
I would look at prints. Yeah.
Okay, so question for each of you: how do you decide? Right, you're looking at amazing art all day long for many years running, and in fact, you're obviously directly involved in the production of it, the innovation behind it. Where are those aha moments for you individually to say, that print I need on my personal wall, not just to be involved in the business practice?
I mean, I kind of cheat the system a little bit. I have a print drawer. You don't probably know this. I have a print drawer at home. Because I actually got into prints, was like very early on Thomas Hart Benton prints. I collect like lithographs. And so this was like before, like when I was like 18, before even like digital art, as well as then I think like across the board, like my philosophy, even like collecting digital, I'm very quiet about my collection. It's like a very private experience for me, even in the digital side. Like it's funny, I have quite a large collection, but I don't necessarily like highlight it on Twitter. And I don't think a lot of people view me as a collector, and it's quite a funny experience for them to find out, like, no, like my friend group claimed punks. Like that was like the community I was part of. It's just a different experience for me. And I think it's just it's always been like what I've been personally drawn to. But I think from coming to Avant Art, there's like technicalities of like, I'm looking at the couture and I wish I could have gotten that print and was like here at the company, of listening to the story behind that. So there's like a few prints that I look at now that I'm like, I just want that because I know the process behind it. And it's like beautiful, like in its own right too.
Yeah, I think I'm similar in a way that, you know, it has to have a strong emotional reaction. Like I can be quite impulsive with, you know, things that I want to have around me. Like I hate having lots of stuff. Like I've got a small flat with my partner, so I can't really have tons of things. But yeah, a lot of I mean, if I'm really honest, I think I don't have a lot of stuff that we've worked on in the last few years, because I guess you get it's like an actor, and you meet actors and they say, have you watched your own TV show? And they say, well, no, Yeah. So it's things that I've been given mainly. You know, I bought a Harlan Miller print recently because I'm friends with him, and there was a print that he gave me a great price on. But you know, I've got an Anthony Hamilton. That was like the first thing I made at Make Ready. You know, one of. I've got drawings from friends and things that I've done. I've got a Damien Hirst that I printed years ago when I worked somewhere else. But I hung it this way up, like the wrong way, because that's the way I looked at it on press. A painting that I bought, you know, from the Left Bank with this artist when I was there with my dad. It's just some unknown like abstract painter who painted it in the 50s. You know, it's not what you think actually. You know, I remember there was this very famous chef called Keith Floyd in England, and he used to go around and make TV shows about very famous restaurants. And they said actually when they got back to the hotel, they just wanted beans on toast because, you know, they were just eating all this really rich food all the time, and actually they just needed a palate cleanser. So I have a lot of beautiful things, but yeah, I guess I have a print drawer as well, but it's mainly like several palettes and my girlfriend's dad's garage, just full of my pension, basically, I guess I would say. But yeah, it has to have a really strong emotional thing. It doesn't have to be, you know, like these condos. You know, I don't own one of these condos, right? But the grease from the ink is under my fingernails, you know, and so I do own them in a sense, and I can look at them all the time and enjoy them. So yeah, ownership is a thing I sort of think about in that way.
As is context, and I'm just listening to you both speak, the context of production so clearly plays in. You know, even Tom, you mentioning the Hearst, that you hung the quote unquote wrong way, but very much the right way for you, because you were involved in the production process, and that was the way that you were looking at it all the time. I mean, I find that to be so fascinating. We talk about context a lot in form of storytelling, in the form of the narrative behind an artwork, and learning about the why of an artist, if you're lucky enough to figure that piece out, or maybe overlay your own experience. But in this case, you both have such a tangible, tactile experience behind the scenes that very few people see, that probably weigh into how you perceive the artwork afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's across the industry of working with artists in the arts as well. Like when you work so closely with them, your kind of perspective of everything changes. There's like, you know, a lot of these artists, like Claire Silver, for example, like looking at how she approaches like even just her digital work has really like radically like how I view it changed, and the appreciation for it. Because especially on like this community in X, a lot of we just see the polished version at the very end. And I think with digital art, it often can be even harder to know the process that goes into it. And then like working with, there's a few artists that genuinely it's been 2 years to get like projects off the ground, and like seeing what really matters to them in that end process. It makes you also appreciate what happened in 2021 so incredibly more, because with that boom economically, so many of these artists of those releases were perfecting those releases for years before that moment. And if you talk to a lot of those artists, it was like just perfect, like a perfect storm of like, it wasn't just something people were just like churning things out like we've seen, you know, just to get things out the door. It's like a lot of people sat, especially on the art block side, was sitting with those algorithms and perfecting that almost like world building for quite significant amount of time, or building the skills to get up to that moment. And so it's made me appreciate a lot of what has happened in this space even further, of like actually giving an artist time to breathe, to create is so critically important. And then also being like pushing them also to do things too. That balance.
Yeah, I think context is everything. It's the same in like sport, you know, like you know, someone can hold a 30-foot putt and it's impressive, but it's the context and the story, and it's the same in, I'm sure, in any sport. It's all about the story. You know, the shot or the famous goal or whatever is impressive, but it's the story builds up to it, and that's why it makes it so interesting. Like, I think the same thing with art. You know, I love Mark Rothko, and I published a small illustrated book about him ages ago called "Hello, my name is Mark Rothko." You can find it in the MoMA library. Yeah. You know, I loved the story of the Seagram murals and how he painted them, and then he went for dinner in the restaurant in the building, and then hated everyone there, and then took all of them back and like gave all the money back. And you know, for me, that's that amazing story and that context, and also the way he made them. And I love hearing when I meet a Web3 artist, like I always want to know, especially Matt again, like I want to, how did you make this? Like, it's so interesting. It's so fascinating how people made their work. I think the process, to be honest, is almost more interesting than the final piece. Sometimes it's almost, the final piece is just a window into this journey that ours has been on. You know?
It's like this tightrope of how much can we get from the artist to that process of comprehension, right? I'm wired to both. I want to know all of it, just like you're saying. I want to know, let me in, let me see the process. And then the tightrope of them sometimes saying like, nope, that's as far as I'm taking you. The rest is mine. I think that's such a magical place to be, is right on the precipice of, I can know this, but I can't know that. And that to me is such a critical component of art too. Speaking of artists, Coldy here saying in GM, great to see you, Coldy. Nice to have you as part of this damn show.
Perfect.
So, yeah, go ahead, Abigail.
I was just gonna say, with the last few minutes, maybe we.
Yeah, I think, you know, the studio is definitely closing down for the day, but we could probably catch a couple of people printing and see the space for sure.
So we'll see how loud it is, and I'm just gonna shuffle we'll stop at 2 places and show around a bit. But I'm gonna mute myself as we go out. It might be loud.
All right, buckle up, everybody. We've prepared you for this moment for 50 minutes. It's time.
Yeah. So perfect. It is a good timing because things are winding down a bit, so it's not
probably-
as crazy
It's
loud.
probably less loud right now. It's probably a perfect time to
Yeah.
do it. This is the screen making. This is quite a loud bit. This is where we make all the stencils. So for Grant Rivenyon, this is the kind of stencil that we would have made to print onto his panels. So you would push an ink through this mesh. This is a polyester mesh and an aluminium frame. And the image is exposed onto it. If you can't hear me, please let me know. It's a wild process. It's a pretty crazy process. So here's another print we're doing for a Chinese artist, and we can expose really high resolution images onto these screens. And for every, like the print that was behind us in the other room, there's about 30 screens in that print.
Yeah.
And so you have to have 30
of
of
these.
and they all have to be exposed manually, and they're very heavy, and they have to be manually loaded into a machine, and then you have to print it by hand, and you have to register. So it's a pretty bonkers process, screen printing. There's a whole load of other components.
This is where all the storage
This
is,
is the stock area.
and then you can kind of see this is actually the full view kind of everything here.
Yeah.
So right here
Digital printer.
is the digital printer. So these were all of our textured prints are made in our working area of the printmakers. This
is where CryptoPunks, this digital printer here is where CryptoPunks was made. This is where Claire Silver was printed right here, and we can actually meet
Anastasia.
Let's go through here.
We've heard so much about her.
Yes, she
This is Anastasia. You're live.
she is
on the podcast.
the woman behind all the digital prints.
There she
A
is,
legend,
yeah.
a true legend.
She is the legend, Anastasia. Yeah, she made all the most famous digital prints that we've done.
And she goes in by hand and like looks at all the artwork and pulls out different elements. It's not like adding just like a simple depth map to it. It's also an art form, and it's why all of our, especially the digital prints, digital texture prints, just can't be replicated. Even if someone else was doing a texture prints, like they don't have an Anastasia.
Exactly.
And
it's all about the people. Anyone like Amazon could buy all this equipment.
Mm-hmm.
The glue that sticks it together is the niche passion, and there really isn't a lot of places.
And the storytelling.
And storytelling, yeah, exactly. It's about having that skill and that knowledge, basically. So that's what the space is about. It just facilitates it. So all the presses have closed down now, but I was just here earlier. So I was slightly late. I was printing here for Maurizio Catalan, the guy who does the
bananas
and the tape. We've got, this is Lily actually, it's one of our printers. She's just packing up for the day. So she's printing a print for a very famous Chinese artist. I won't say their name.
Not yet.
But you can see, this is the printing line, basically. So she has a UV dryer here. This can dry and cure the inks. So it's actually very similar to the digital processes. It's a similar ink.
Mm-hmm.
It's a UV curable ink. And this is the printing line. So you can see it here. It goes all the way down here. So she's managing this whole machine.
We'll skip that.
Skip that a bit.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
We're in Avant Arte alpha territory.
This is kind of actually where a lot of the new works are done.
So shall I do a little pan with the laptop? If I stand up on something, I'll show you. This would be a great way, not just my face. Here we are. So these are the printing lines that we run most of our images on, right? And they go all the way down there, and there's Abigail, and you can see this is one of the machines. So you print it here. You're managing the press there. So incredibly manual to use this machine. So I said it's not all that noisy. It's the end of the day, but it's definitely not as noisy. Sorry, just reading one of the comments. It's definitely not as noisy as a Heidelberg. No, that they'd be incredibly loud. But we've turned all the machines off now. So usually this machine here would be running, and this squeegee would be moving, back and forth, and Lily would be standing here and managing the press,
and changing all the settings constantly. And then the conveyor belt would take it through that tunnel dryer, and she would be inspecting them as she goes. So yeah, that's just one of the lines basically. And we've printed Mactus Laurea on one of these machines.
But yeah, that is kind of the sum of it.
Kind of the space. Yeah, we could spend hours going into
going
every
hours,
detail,
but I'll let Tom go to finish up closing for the day.
Thank you guys.
But
See you
essentially,
later.
why I wanted to do this today is like for this whole community to understand like how much really goes into this. It's a very much a labor of love. And also like the artists, what they're entrusting us with. I think when you see the full operation, it really puts into perspective of like what we're trying to do, not just like add physicals to the space, but also create like little markers within the history to offer this service for artists to do physicals. But as well as like on the flip side, we're really wanting to bring the digital world to the traditional world. And like that's why we're moving slowly, is like how the question's not equally of like how we can do this for digital artists, but like how can we bring more of like Web3 into this world, into the traditional world, like, and how does that look in like 5-10 years? And we had the luxury of moving it intentionally. So, but yeah.
Abigail, this is amazing. I think this episode of the damn show could quite easily be called The Art of Printmaking. I mean, that's what I'm leaving with, even just meeting Anastasia and talking through, you know, even the line just now of yes, and Amazon could come in and want to recreate this exact facility. But at the end of the day, the end product is going to be vastly different in the same way that I personally, yes, me, RD, I could pick up a paintbrush. You're probably not going to get out the other side.
Exactly.
What so many of the artists that we love could produce. So I think that's one of my favorite aspects of today.
Perfect. Well, this has been such a treat, and thank you for having us on as well.
It's a pleasure. Please don't let this be the last time. Maybe we'll find something fun around a release in the future.
Very exciting. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. John Z27, Coldy, Haas, Praveen, Gonaji, and so many more. This is The Damn Show, presented with 24 Hours of Art and Super Air, powered by Gandhi. We'll see you for normal programming next Monday. I hope you enjoyed today.